Back here on SportsLine on News Channel 5 Plus on a stormy night here in Nashville. But fortunately, the connection with tonight's guest, Jonathan Hutton, is still good as we spend another evening with Jonathan Hollywood Hutton. He joins us from Murfreesboro via Zoom. Jay Hutt, great to have you here. You know, last week, it seemed like hopefully John Robinson put an end to all these ridiculous A.J. Brown trade rumors.
Yeah.
And you know, you kind of took a shot at my peoples from New York for making this story up or creating this buzz. But you're 100% right. That's where it's coming from, because it doesn't sound like it's coming from here in Nashville. Well,
your people would be those who cover the Giants, not the Jets. And this is the Jets, to be fair.
Right.
And I think the guys reporting it are actually hearing A.J. Brown's name from New York, from the Jets, who, for whatever, the one thing that doesn't make sense to me is why they want to invest so much into wide receiver. They just, you know, they signed Corey Davis last offseason. They drafted, they've got more at receiver. I'm trying to figure out, like, why they want to go and pay the big bucks. And I get they've got the quarterback, but you can find receivers in the draft. Teams do it every single year and get them on rookie contracts. To me, I found that peculiar. Also, if the Titans were going to trade A.J. Brown, the time to do it would have been when Miami was looking for a receiver, when the Raiders were looking for a receiver, and they wanted to trade and sign a big-time contract to some of the top wideouts. Now, I'm not trying to say that A.J. Brown is Devontae Adams. He's not that guy yet. Tyreek Hill is much more accomplished and has more bling for the rings, for the Super Bowls, than A.J. Brown. So I get the big money deals, but that's when you drive up the price instead of just negotiating with the Jets, if in fact you want to trade A.J. Now, one more point on this, John, because I think this is intriguing. What we saw the Chiefs do and what we saw the Packers do is pay their quarterback and then trade their wide receiver for draft picks. And then they'll build around the quarterback because they've got their franchise guy. The Titans aren't in position to do that. And so I think it's apples and oranges when trying to compare that situation with teams at the top, because the Titans aren't ready to fully invest again in Ryan Tannehill. They're more likely to invest in full with A.J. Brown, unlike the Chiefs and the Packers, who gave Mahomes $500 million over the lifetime contract and just made Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay the highest paid player in football next year. That made sense. And they got tons of draft pick and capital in return. I don't think it makes sense for the Titans. Maybe I'm wrong. But to me, this signals that if you sign A.J. Brown to a big deal, you're likely getting another quarterback on a much cheaper contract moving forward to structure within the salary cap. Moving forward, not now.
Yeah, and plus, Jonathan, what message would it send to the Titans fan base if you trade A.J. Brown, right? Because the belief is, listen, I don't think they're going to win 12 games again next year. I don't think they're going to be the #1 seed, but they can certainly win their division, win a home game, and then move on and see what happens from there. The window, it's closing, but it's still open. You trade A.J. Brown, you're telling your fans, hey, you know what, we tried our best. You know, last year was our best shot. You know, you had John Robinson crying at the NFL Combine. It would send a horrible message to your fan base if you did this.
Completely agree. And you're right. I mean, no matter how much we want to nitpick, and maybe it's beyond nitpick, like it deserves criticism the way they finished the last 2 years. And they would raise their hand and say that. You're right about the window, because they should win the division again. Colts got better at quarterback, but the Titans should be better than Indianapolis, just if I'm looking at it on paper.
Right.
And with that in mind, that they're hosting a playoff game. So they're in the mix in what is an extremely tough AFC. They're not playing in the AFC West. They're playing in the AFC South. Now, the downside this year is they are facing the AFC West. And so that plays into some of the record predictions. But no doubt, the Titans are in the playoffs. If we're just sitting here, and we are saying that they are in April, we were saying that last year too, and I feel the same way. I'm not as confident in them making a run as I was a year ago at this time. But John, there's nothing to say that they can't get hot at the right time, and there's no reason to trade away. Arguably, you could say he's the top 2 player on the roster. I would argue top 3.
Sure.
I mean. He's not someone that I would be looking to move. There are other quote-unquote stars on this team that I would trade way ahead of A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is worth paying the big bucks to. He exemplifies guys that you try to identify in the draft and mold, not even mold. He comes already preset and ready to go into the Titans way, the Titans mantra. You don't get rid of those guys.
I agree with you. Now, he does need to show that he can stay healthy for a full season.
Yeah.
But, you know, and speaking of healthy, obviously they signed Robert Woods to be the 1A or the 2 in the Titans offense. And I think if he's healthy, he's a good fit. If he's healthy, he's coming off major knee surgery. So my flags go up a little bit about that. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's another offseason where their number 2 option, you're worried about health concerns. But at least with this, I don't want to call it routine because every player comes back different from the knee. But it's not the soft tissue injuries of a guy at the end of his career, which is what Julio was breaking down.
Yeah.
And it was more about him not being able to just go out and practice and then recoup and get back out to practice. Robert Woods is the opposite. He had the injury at the wrong time of his contract, and the Rams traded him and then upgraded with Allen Robinson in free agency and made him expendable. I'm more optimistic about this offseason at wide receiver with the move that they made prior to last year based on what we saw from Julio. And look, not only wide receiver, but John, the move they made with Robert Woods and then bringing in the upgraded tight end with Austin Hooper, they're better at both positions now than where they ended the season 2.5 months ago. That's a positive, even though I'm not trying to, hit the gas pedal and say the Titans are back, baby. I'm not saying that either.
Right.
Because it's still all about January now. But that's a good thing. That's a compliment to them that I can sit here in April and say I'll judge them in January of 2023.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. We all went through the 5-27 death march of those 2 back-to-back years, and it just wasn't a lot of fun to talk about the Titans, to cover about the Titans. Now, they're an interesting football team. What about the offensive line, Jay Hutt? Obviously, Saffold's gone. They need an LG, they need an RT. Both Robinson and Mike Vrabel have come out and said that, Dylan Radins, we like him, but he's not ready for prime time yet, which is interesting when you consider they drafted him in the 2nd round. Any concerns? Should there be any concerns about the offensive line going into this offseason?
Forgive me, I was looking at a text that I'd sent my buddy Philip Noel of Titans Radio.
Yeah.
Because Warren Sharp sent this out about the O-line. Taylor Lewan hasn't played a full season since 2017.
Wow.
Aaron Brewer at left guard, currently he's your guy, allowed the most sacks of any offensive lineman returning to the Titans roster. Ben Jones is the 10th best center per Pro Football Focus. Nate Davis at right guard ranks 75th of 94 guards in pressure rate allowed. And then Dylan Radins at right tackle, 14.3 pressure rate, ranking 111th out of 111, dead last. So that right there would make it look like this is the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line for Joe Burrow. And they just showed that even with offensive line issues, you can make a run and run your offense.
Right.
This is about Taylor Lewan staying healthy. This is about Ben Jones being as durable as he has been, and Nate Davis being able to take his game to a completely next level. But beyond that, Dylan Radins has to play a key role in this offensive line. They have screwed it up with Isaiah Wilson, and we said then, and we can continue to say now, and you can run the tape back when they screwed that pick up, they were winning, and they won last year too. But at some point, when you miss on these key first-round picks, especially on the offensive line, as you start to rebuild and retool, these guys are supposed to be hitting their prime right now. Isaiah Wilson should be going into year number 3 and being someone that you can rely on, and instead, he's on a yacht down in Miami Beach somewhere. and the point being, John, like at some point, you have to make up for that, and you can't just keep replacing them with rookies at the top of the draft. Because you're going to have other positions and other contracts up. So Radins has to play a factor as a 2nd-round pick. And then at left guard, Aaron Brewer can be the guy right now. I don't know if he ends up being the starter, but they've got to find a swing player. And I know they brought in a guy from Seattle. They've got to find a guy that they can rely on that stays healthy. But the key in all this starts with Lewan. If Lewan stays healthy, that doesn't rearrange their order of how they see things going. And that's a big if, because Warren Sharp pointed out that we haven't seen him play a full season since 2017, and that's an issue.
It definitely is. And, of course, the offensive line triggers the running game, which is powered by Derrick Henry. He's coming off the first major injury of his career. Listen, running back is a very, very tenuous position, especially in the NFL. Careers are short. Once injuries happen for these guys, they tend to, snowball a little bit. Yeah. Where are you at with Derrick Henry coming off that major foot injury, and do you think we could possibly start to see a slight decline in his production?
Maybe. I don't doubt Derrick Henry, though.
Right.
I just can't. The way he came back from the injury and tried to play, I mean, it's hard to doubt him. The guy has been durable throughout his career. And I know all guys tend to hit a wall and then they drop, right? Mm-hmm. Drop off with production. But, John, this sounds terrible, but it's life in the NFL.
Yeah.
They will run that guy into the ground based on his contract. Mm-hmm. They will get the most out of that contract. And right now it benefits the Tennessee Titans more than it does Derrick Henry. So that's cold and callous, but that's the truth. I mean, they're going to continue to ride that horse because that is their guy. That's their bell cow, and he is their offense. And honestly, it works until the playoffs. And what we've seen is Tannehill doesn't step up in the big moments.
Right.
Other players around him can step up too. But the guy's the quarterback of the NFL roster. And what we've seen in the playoffs, the last 3 losses, Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, is that those teams have shut down Derrick Henry, and then option B or option 1B hasn't been able to pick up where they left off and continue with the game plan. That's the issue. It's not Derrick Henry. And I also think that they realize that they can run the football without him.
Yeah.
I think last year shows that this line and this system can run the ball. And I think they go more too tight this year than what they did a year ago, which is even more of a run-first mentality. So they're better with Henry on the field, but they showed that they can win games without him too. And I think the system itself works. Their way works, but they've got to have the leader at quarterback that does more than just regular season football.
All right, before the break, let me ask you about the draft real quick, because I admittedly have not really done a lot of boning up on the draft. I plan to in the days ahead.
It's kind of a boring draft this year.
It is. There's not a lot of sizzle, right? There just isn't, probably because there's not a surefire, stud quarterback there. Some decent quarterbacks, but, like you said, there's not a lot of sizzle there. I would think, I'm just throwing some positions out here, tight end, offensive line, wide receiver would all be on the Titans' radar, no?
Yeah, I would start with wide receiver. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see another offensive lineman, but here we go.
Right. See, I do. I'm a Giants fan. I want every pick. I want the Giants to pick all offensive linemen and 1 stud pass rusher. That's
your team. Your team has like 5. You have 5 picks in the first round.
Yeah,
I think.
New GM. Hopefully they'll get it right.
I'm with you on tight end. I think tight end can come a bit later. Mm-hmm. When I say a bit later, they don't have a second-round pick, so third-round-ish. Look, Traylon Burks. Trey Burks from Arkansas is a stud. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's there when the Titans pick. He's climbing. Here I am being Mr. Draft Guy. He's climbing draft boards. But he's all the talk right now, and he's AJ Brown-like in his approach to the game. He's had a visit with the Titans in Nashville too, so I would point to wide receiver, and then there's a center as well that would come to mind. But they have options because of what they've done in free agency at wideout and tight end. If Desmond Ridder is available, John, look, all this discussion about the quarterbacks. It's because the teams at the top don't need a quarterback. Right? The Titans don't plan on drafting at the top of the draft anytime soon. if you've got value there, I would consider it. Because, look, here's the other thing the Titans have shown. They don't get much out of their draft picks the last 2 years, and they still win football games.
True.
Top of the line draft picks, I'm saying, first-round guys.
Right.
With Caleb Farley and Isaiah Wilson. I mean, those guys have been complete zero non-factors. I would consider quarterback. I would.
Wow.
Because especially if you're going to pay A.J. Brown top-line money, at some point you got to cut salary somewhere, and you can get out of Tannehill's contract next offseason without the dead money hit that they would have had this year if you trade him. Again, I'm looking ahead. I realize this team has some holes that they desperately need to fill, and there's some really solid players at receiver. You mentioned defense as well. I would be hard pressed to consider Desmond Ridder if he's available where the Titans select late in the first round.
Wow. Well, I'd much rather listen to you talk about the NFL draft than Mel Kiper Jr.
Hey.
You got better hair, and you actually know what you're talking about. So.
Well, I don't know if I have better hair, or if I definitely don't know about the draft the way Kiper does. But I will say, here's the prediction for you.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of buzz about the draft. ESPN and NFL Network will manufacture buzz over the next week. There will be some type of ripple effect with their coverage to create drama.
Yep.
Where there's really not that much drama. That's my expectation over the next week. You can buy into the hype. It's no different than WWE. You can buy into the storyline, but just know it's a television show.
Yes.
And they're trying to create buzz for the TV show that happens 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Very good point. All right, let's take another break. When we come back, Jay Hutt, I want to talk to you about the Predators. And we'll touch on, since we're talking about stadiums, hey, we're about to open our new soccer stadium here in Music City. We'll talk to Jay Hutt about that and plenty more. It's another evening with Jonathan Hutton. We're glad to have him. Glad to have you with us here on SportsLine as well. Stay with us.